Hey everybody! Today we are going to be talking about problems with rectangles and rhombi. I was like saying that. It could be rhombuses as well, but rhombi sounds a lot cooler. So when I say problems with these things, I don't mean that I have a problem with it, but that we'll be doing problems, right? The last lesson we were basically looking at properties of these things, right? We looked at rectangles, rhombuses, and squares, right? Remember, a square was basically a rectangle and a rhombus together. Just to quickly review, what makes something a rectangle? Well, it's a parallelogram where all four angles are right angles, right? Quadrilateral too, right? If it's got four sides and it also has four right angles, it's a rectangle. And then a rhombus was a parallelogram where all four sides were congruent, right? Four congruent sides, parallelogram makes it a rhombus. And we had talked about some of the properties of these things. And in this lesson, we're going to be focusing a little bit more specifically on these ones. So with a rectangle, what do you need to know for this lesson? That the diagonals are congruent. So with a rectangle, every single time, these two diagonal lines are going to be equal to each other. So what I can say for sure is that AC, right, segment AC equals BD, segment BD, right? So diagonals are congruent. I mean, that's pretty basic, right? We'll see an example of what I'm going to actually have you do with that later on. And then rhombi, right? Good old rhombi. Everybody loves rhombi. Just say that a few times. It's fun. Rhombi. So anyway, all four sides are congruent. We know that. And one of the key defining features with a rhombus is that the diagonals are perpendicular. Perpendicular. What's that word mean again? 90 degrees, right? That two lines intersect to form 90 degrees. Like this, right? So, look what happens, right? So if I were to draw the diagonals in, that's going to make a perfect 90-degree angle in the center there. And all four of them would be 90 degrees, right? All four of the center angles. That would also be 90 degrees. This one, right? So all four of these are 90-degree angles. They're right angles, right? So they make 90 degrees, right? And the diagonals also bisect the opposite angles. What does that mean? Well, first, let's make sure we remember. When you look at a rhombus, well, a rhombus is a parallelogram, which means the opposite angles are congruent, right? This is congruent to this, and the left angle is congruent to the right angle, right? The angles across from each other are congruent. Well, these diagonals, they basically cut the rhombus in half, right? It goes straight through the middle here. It goes straight through the middle here. So what that means, let's use a different color. This angle would be congruent to this angle. You see that? These two angles are congruent. They're also congruent to these two angles. So basically, all four of these angles are the same. And the same would be true here. This angle is congruent to this angle, right? These two are the same, just as these two are the same. Right? Both of these angles would be equal to both of these angles. because the diagonal is bisecting this angle. It's also bisecting this angle. And these two angles are the same, so when they're cut in half, they'd still be the same, right? Similar concept here. This angle and this angle are equal. When you cut them in half, you'd still get two equal sides, or two equal angles. And basically, that's all the information that you need for the assignments. You literally just need to know these three facts. That with a rectangle, diagonals are congruent. With a rhombus, the diagonals are going to make 90 degrees in the center, and each diagonal is going to be cutting the opposite angles in half. Let's just kind of see this in action. Okay. So for the first example, we're given a rectangle, and we're asked to find the value of x, right? So how do we know this is a rectangle? Because I didn't tell you, right? It doesn't say find the value of x in this rectangle, and you're not allowed to just assume it. But I do notice there are 4 right angles. That means this is a rectangle. It's got 4 sides, it's got 4 right angles, so it's a rectangle. Which means I know for a fact that the diagonals are congruent. Because this is a rectangle, I'm allowed to say that AD equals BC, right? And if you notice down here, I've given you values for the diagonals, right? AD is 3x minus 5, and BC is 22. So, let's just substitute our values. AD is 3x minus 5, and BC is 22. So I used my geometric property to set up a very basic 2-step equation. And we can solve that relatively easily, right? Add 5, 3x equals 27, divide by 3, turns out that x equals 9. Very simple and straightforward. You've been doing this all year long, right? Setting up equations. You're just setting it up based off of a new relationship, right? Diagonals are congruent. Very, very basic, very straightforward. Now with the rhombus, it can get a little more complicated because there's a couple extra rules. And you know, we're also kind of requiring you to remember some things from the past. So let's get into this. All it says is find all the missing angles. Again, nowhere here does it say that this is a rhombus, right? How do you know that it is a rhombus, however? 4 congruent sides, right? Because all 4 sides are congruent, it has to be a rhombus. So now I can start thinking about the properties of a rhombus, like the fact that the center angles should all be 90, right? Because this is a rhombus, the diagonals are going to be perpendicular, which does mean this is a right angle, which means this is 90 degrees, this is 90 degrees, and hey, guess what? Angle 1 is 90 degrees. You see that? This missing angle here is 90 degrees. All 4 of these are 90 degrees, right? Now, the next angle, angle 2, well, now we have to start thinking about the other part of this property and the fact that this diagonal here is bisecting these opposite angles, right? What does that mean? Do you notice that this angle here is 40 degrees? Wouldn't that mean that this angle over here is also 40, right? both of these angles are going to be 40 degrees because it was divided in two equal parts, which means two equal angles. And guess what? These two angles are the same, which means both of these would also be 40. This angle's 40 degrees, and angle 2 is 40 degrees. So now we know angle 1, and we know angle 2. The last one to find is angle 3. Now, for angle 3, you have to realize something. Because I don't know what these angles are, right? I don't know what this angle is. So on the surface, it seems like I can't really figure out what angle 3 is. But if you look at this diagram closely, you might notice that this rhombus was divided into 4 triangles, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 triangles, right? So look at this one down here. You have angle 2, you have angle 3, you have 90 degrees. Well, what do we know about all 3 angles in a triangle? They add up to 180, right? So I can say this for sure. So what is this? Angle 2 plus angle 3 plus 90 degrees equals 180, right? Well, didn't I just figure out what angle 2 was? Angle 2 is 40. So I'm going to put a 40 here, plus angle 3, plus 90, equal to 180. Well, combine the 40 and the 90. You're going to get angle 3 plus 130 equals 180. And you can solve that by subtracting 130. That's going to give you an end result of angle 3 equal to 50 degrees. So there's all 3 of the missing angles. Again, that would mean that this angle is 50, and this angle is 50, and this angle is 50. This would be 50, this would be 40. Real quick, let's just check to see if this was right. I know I've mentioned this before. If I have a rhombus, or anything with 4 sides, right, a quadrilateral, you know how a triangle, the 3 angles add up to 180. In any quadrilateral, the 4 angles add up to 360. So let's think about it. If these two are 40, wouldn't that make this one 80 degrees? If these two are 40, this one's also 80 degrees. 50 and 50 would make this a 100 degree angle. 50 and 50 would make this 100 degrees. If I take 100 plus 80, that would be 180. Plus 100, 280. Plus 80, you get 360. So all 4 of the angles, right, if I were to take the diagonals away, so you get the full 80 here and the full 100 here, add them up, you get 360. Just like we were supposed to, which means these are all right. It's not really that hard. This is pretty much all you're going to be doing in this lesson. Problems like this, requiring the same kind of thought process, right? So as long as you remember that with rectangles, diagonals are congruent, and with a rhombus, you're going to get 90 degrees in the center, and then you're going to get angles that are cut in half on opposite ends. It's really all you need. So that is it. Number of the day for this lesson is 22. Right? 2, 2, 22, 22. Got it? Good. All right. I'll see you next time.